Story 1. I almost married someone simply because I didn't want to be alone. Looking back, I realize I nearly sentenced myself to a lifetime of quiet misery. Story 2. When my ex cheated on me with a boy she helped raise when he was 17 and she was 34. A year later, she had his baby. I'm grateful that I can't reproduce. I cannot imagine being stuck in that situation. Story 3. My former boyfriend from high school became a child offender. I do not know the details, but he received a 60-year sentence with no possibility of parole. He committed a truly terrible act, and I hope he remains imprisoned. Story 4. Senior year, economics final. Word spread that someone had the test early. Many of us were nervous about graduating, so a few students shared it. I looked at it and considered using it, but something felt wrong. Too many people knew, and I figured if I could tell, so could a teacher. So I didn't. I just studied what I could and hoped for a C. They caught 7 students. Patterns in the answers revealed them. All of them were suspended and missed graduation. I wasn't proud of my grade, but I walked with my class. That was enough. Story 5. I almost sold my house and moved my family 4 states from Pennsylvania to one of the most expensive housing markets on the East Coast. All to take a job that would have led to my being fired a month after accepting it. The owner of the business was negotiating to sell it and did not inform anyone. When he finally did, the new owners came in and fired every employee in one day. Story 6. When I was a United Nations soldier in Croatia in 1995, a very drunken Croatian militiaman accidentally discharged a burst from his automatic rifle next to my leg and missed my foot by less than an inch. Story 7. Worked in 7 World Trade Center across the street from the 2 towers on September 11th. Walked away after the plane struck but before the 2 collapses. Story 8. I was making out and starting to get undressed with a guy when my roommate came in. A few weeks later, this same guy hooked up with one of our friends and ended up with 2 STDs. Story 9. My uncle on my father's side was recently convicted of child abuse at the school where he worked several decades ago. My mother was always cautious about letting me be alone with him, and since I found that out, I have always trusted her judgment about people. Story 10. I taught archery at a summer camp one year. The rule was that after firing, you put the bow down and step back, and then I would collect the arrows once everyone was done. The group counselors were supposed to watch the kids to ensure nobody picked up a bow until I was back. However, since most of them were high school students, I didn't trust any of them to babysit a well-behaved child. They weren't paying attention when one of the problem campers picked up his bow and fired another arrow at the targets. I saw the movement in my peripheral vision and ducked behind the hay bale just before the arrow embedded itself. It was a weak, child-sized bow firing blunt arrows. While it probably wouldn't have killed me, it certainly would have hurt. That camper was barred from the archery range for the summer, and the counselors began making the jokes you might expect from the situation. That is how I dodged not a bullet, but an arrow. Story 11. My ex cheated on me, and it destroyed me. It turned out she partied her way into sexually transmitted diseases that even affect her new child. She and the baby are also struggling with addiction, and she lost custody of the child to her parents. I am grateful I avoided a difficult situation with her. Story 12. I didn't dodge the bullet. I was just lucky it didn't hit anything vital. The bullet, in this case, refers to an actual bullet fired from a gun. Story 13. My friend and I had planned a helicopter skiing trip in the Rockies, but my friend had to cancel, so the plans fell through. It turned out that on that particular day, there was a crash with no survivors. Story 14. I'm in excellent health. I work out regularly and am a fitness enthusiast, and nobody guesses my age. I have well-defined abs and muscular shoulders and chest, and I can do just about anything. My blood pressure is perfect, with a low heart rate and normal cholesterol levels. Doctors usually shake their heads and say, "Wow, you don't look 70, maybe 50?" However, I experienced a dull ache in my chest at times and discovered that my heart had 4 major blockages, about 95 to 99%. They took me to the operating room immediately and addressed the issues. I was in the hospital for a week, and one of the nurses remarked that I had a guardian angel looking over me because I shouldn't have survived. Almost no blood was reaching my heart, and I had almost no symptoms. I have been on a mission to encourage people to get their hearts checked because you never know. So far, I've had 2 people tell me they discovered serious problems, which may have saved their lives. Get a heart calcium scan, everyone. Story 15. Recently, someone I was interested in showed up late to our second date. After I pressed him on why, he confessed that he was breaking up with his casual connection, and it took longer than expected. It didn't sit well with me, but I still offered to reschedule. He continued, "Oh no, I wanted to make this because I won't have time after this anyway. So romantic." I certainly dodged a bullet. Story 16. The memory I recall feels quite ordinary, but here it goes. When I was about 7 years old, I was walking across the parking lot of my apartment complex. Suddenly, a black car sped through, easily going at least 60 miles per hour. I found myself in the middle of the street with no way to avoid it, and I have this vivid image of a black Mercedes heading straight toward me. I am not sure what happened next because I couldn't have jumped out of the way that quickly, yet suddenly I was several feet away in a parking space. The car screeched by exactly where I had just been, and it absolutely would have injured or killed me. The driver, a teenager being reckless, looked terrified as if they had seen a ghost, and I felt like I was losing my mind. They even asked me how I had moved so quickly, but I had no explanation. I still don't understand how I ended up 10 feet away from where I was just standing. In any case, I managed to avoid a tragic fate. Story 17. We went joyriding with our older friend's Jeep. We were all about 14 years old and under the influence with no license, while he was 18 and intoxicated. We didn't turn our lights on, and a police officer pulled us over. Surprisingly, it turned out to be the neighbor of one of the kids who was with us. We did chores for him regularly. He took one look at us, shook his head, and told the most sober person to get in the driver's seat and follow him back home. The officer was incredibly understanding and had us stack wood all summer in return. We should have faced serious consequences, but we got lucky, I guess. Story 18. A year ago, I was working in retail while attending university. Most of my shifts were alone, usually in the evenings from 5 to 9 p.m. The front of the store was all glass, and there were parking stalls directly in front, so I could see anyone who parked there very clearly. My boss acted like a micro-influencer, and the store had a girly theme, with lots of pink decorations. All of us employees had our pictures posted online on social media platforms. Completing all the closing tasks alone often took about an hour, but we were only paid for 15 minutes after closing. My store was located in a hard-to-find corner of the parking lot, so by the evenings, it was usually quiet, allowing me to start cleaning early and leave on time. One night, as I began cleaning up because there was no one around, a car parked in front with its bright lights on, but nobody got out. I continued cleaning, keeping an eye out in case it was a customer. Half an hour passed, and no one exited the car. Feeling uneasy, I turned off the lights and locked the door a few minutes early. I went to the back room to do some other tasks, and when I returned, I saw a guy in a red tracksuit standing in front of the glass watching me, with the headlights still on. I was 19 and it was my second job, so I didn't know what to do. I continued closing the store, hoping he would be gone by the time I had to take out the trash. He wasn't gone, so I called my manager to explain the situation, feeling anxious. She simply advised me to press the panic button if he did anything. I froze and pretended to look busy until he eventually got back in his car after about 20 minutes of staring at me. Once he left, I calmed down and walked the trash to the dumpster, only to see the car parked around the corner. There was a cannabis store a couple of doors down that was open later than my store, and I was friends with the employees there. I quickly headed over to the cannabis store and said hello. I heard the door open behind me and then quickly close. I asked if they had seen the strange car and the guy, and they replied that they had indeed seen him standing around. He had just walked into the cannabis store behind me, but then seemed to realize I knew the staff and left quickly. I was overwhelmed with fear. However, I ended up getting a ride home from a guy I had a crush on who worked there. My boss and manager did nothing about the situation, and I continued working evening shifts alone until they illegally fired me months later. Story 19. I went on a first date with a woman. Long story short, she wanted 2 to 3 drops of my blood every month to live a normal life. Yes, this topic came up on our first date. No second date. Story 20. I literally dodged a bullet. The person next to me was being shot at. The first shot missed and I dove out of the way. The second shot hit the wall exactly where I had been standing. The shooter never actually hit the target. They were a bad shot, I guess. Story 21. When I was 11, a boy 5 years older than me at church started paying attention to me. I was a depressed and emotionally neglected child, and my parents were fighting a lot at the time. Over the next 2 years, we became friends and hung out at youth group events, which were quite frequent. Of course, being young, having an older boy pay attention to me made me feel good, even if we were just friends. Over time, I truly became obsessed with him. I loved and cared about him, but I was sure he would never see me that way. The summer I turned 14, he joined the military. He had been charged with statutory rape, and somehow, through some sort of plea deal, the charges were dropped because he was joining the military. Before he left, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. So for the next 7 months, we kept our relationship a total secret. He would call, and I would wait by the phone so no one else would answer it. We communicated through social media and on my friend's phone at school, and we sent letters through her address. He planned to pay for my college, and we were going to have children right away when I turned 18. Honestly, I would have been willing to start sooner with how confused I was. He came home on leave in January or February. My friend's mother and a man who volunteered in our youth group conspired to get me to my friend's house to see him. He gave me many presents, most of which I kept at school or at my friend's house. The following week, there was a Super Bowl party for the youth group held at a trailer park. We hung out, and my youth pastor clearly knew something was not right but never said anything. We had to be sneaky, but I didn't understand why at the time. I just thought he didn't like me as much as he said he did. He waited until everyone was watching the game outside. I had a necklace with 3 hearts on it, and I wanted to put one on his dog tags. I reached for the chain, but he had a ring on it and gave it to me along with a tag. Then, being 14, I kissed him on the cheek because I wanted him to kiss me, and he asked, "Why do girls always do that?" Then he kissed me, but he made it feel like it was entirely my fault. On the phone, he would get angry if I mentioned any of my male friends, and he was very unpredictable about everything. He made me feel worthless. I was not allowed to tell my parents. They suspected something was wrong but never addressed it, which aligns with how my whole childhood went. I was afraid that if they found out, they would be mad at me. Eventually, I decided to end it because I had a gut feeling it was wrong. I thought it was my conscience because I was lying to my parents and idolizing him above God. But I believe it was God protecting me. Who knows what other messed up things would have happened. At least we would have started having sex, and I probably would have gotten pregnant. He ended up using drugs when he got home. Still, the worst thing all these years later is that I don't know if he ever actually loved me, but I loved him. Story 22. I was working a job where I was overworked and underpaid, but I was up for a massive promotion, and the work was pretty cool. Out of nowhere, another well-known company sent me an email saying I was recommended for a role they were recruiting for. I ended up taking the interview and felt uncertain about it since it offered a bit more money, but it was a sort of sidestep career-wise that I wasn't looking to make. In the end, I took the role after giving it more thought. That was in November 2019. When lockdown happened, it absolutely wrecked my old company, and 80% of the people I worked with were immediately furloughed and eventually laid off. My new company was busy during the pandemic, and while it wasn't easy in the first few months to get our remote workflow down, I safely avoided being unemployed during that time. Story 23. I had been working at this place for over a year. Often I worked evenings, but for one reason or another, I wasn't scheduled that day. That was when a coworker, who had only been there for a couple of weeks, collapsed. She received immediate medical attention, but there was nothing to be done. She died. Out of nowhere, 1 minute she was fine and then she wasn't. My mental health still isn't great, but at that time I was heading to a bad place. If I had witnessed someone die in front of me, it may have gotten even worse. I know it's not really avoiding a bullet, but still. Story 24. I broke up with my ex after trade school because he decided not to go into work, claiming he was depressed. I saw myself potentially getting pregnant and taking care of everything while he did nothing, so I left him. Later, he attempted to have relations with my mother. He has since been to multiple mental health facilities and has several stalking charges. Story 25. I went on a date with a guy who seemed very strange and had a tendency toward violence. I blocked him immediately after the date. Unfortunately, the girl he dated after me was severely beaten by him and nearly lost her life. I believe she is okay now. Story 26. I was helping my friend change a tire. While kneeling, I almost lowered the truck onto my leg. I still cringe at the thought from time to time. Story 27. I interviewed for a job and decided something felt off, so I didn't take it. Later, I found out that the person who got the job ended up facing legal troubles alongside the company's leadership. Story 28. I was a sleepy 20-something running late for my bus to school. I saw the bus cross the intersection and pull up to the stop across the street. In a haze, I ran diagonally across the intersection against two green lights. A car going 50 miles per hour missed me by about 2 inches, aided by my semi-conscious jump out of the way. I thought I was like a character from an action movie. They thought I was foolish. Story 29. I was involved with an 18-year-old girl when the condom broke. She told me she missed her period, and a lot of things seemed to be going wrong. Turned out she was allergic to latex, but for 3 days we were both convinced she was pregnant. Story 30. I was the person behind the bloody sheet on the local news. I was hit by a drunk driver. My head got wedged under another car's tire, resulting in a traumatic brain injury that led to a coma. When I woke up, I had a different personality, no memory of the past year, and lost my sense of smell and taste. On the bright side, it inspired me to write and record a solo album during my recovery. If you're interested, the album 9FM by the artist 9FM features the music I created during that time. The streaming everywhere. The first song is called A Deep Water. Enjoy. Thank you. Story 31. I was with a girl who tried to be very controlling. She wanted to combine our bank accounts before we even got married, and I was not comfortable with that. I was already considering breaking up with her when she gave me an out by confessing she never wanted children. That was a deal breaker for me since I did want children, so I broke up with her. She ended up finding a man who married her after 3 months, but she stole his money and then divorced him. She apparently did it 2 more times before she finally got caught. Story 32. I almost signed a lease for a small studio in a 20-year-old building with sketchy neighbors because I thought I wouldn't find anything better for the price and area. I ended up finding a brand new studio to rent in a nicer place, with a bus stop across the street. Everyone who visits tells me how lucky I am. Story 33. When I was a sophomore in high school, a girl I had a small crush on decided to like me back. A few weeks after we started dating, she became pushy about being intimate. I was very comfortable in my shell, so I awkwardly shut her down each time. She then decided to break up with me because I refused to have sex, which was not surprising. A few more weeks went by, and I heard she had a new boyfriend. Again, no surprise, as I assumed she would move on to someone who would give her what she wanted. That same school year, she ended up pregnant with twins. Her children are now well into their teenage years. Story 34. There was a time when I had a slim, but technically possible chance of joining Channel Awesome. Years later, it was revealed how poorly management performed and how creators were treated. What was once regret and thoughts of what if turned into retroactive relief. Sometimes I am grateful for unanswered prayers. Story 35. This story is actually funny. I was skipping class in the games area at my school and playing foosball when a teacher appeared. I ducked down quickly, and I don't know how she didn't see me. This happened a few more times, and the coordinator also showed up. A teacher came after me to say something, but she didn't even question why I was there. She simply stated what she had to say and left. Story 36. My ex-fiancée kicked me out of the house in the middle of the night because we had an argument. I feel like I dodged a bullet because we were planning to have kids. What kind of loving father would do that to the mother of his children? Story 37. I was absent from class because I was not feeling well. That same day, the ceiling of the classroom collapsed, and some classmates were injured by the debris. Story 38. I had a holiday fling as a teenager. The guy's mother and my mother are friends, so I still heard about him from time to time. When he got older, he went to college near my place, and my mother invited him over for dinner. As we reconnected as just friends, he bragged about how he had convinced his wait until marriage girlfriend back home to sleep with him before he left. He then slept with her best friend and left the drama behind. He did it because he knew he wouldn't have to deal with the repercussions and was quite proud of how clever his move had been. He was such a nice and cute boy at 15. That was the biggest bullet I ever dodged. Story 39. During my deployment, I slept on the bottom bunk with my uniform on top. Many mornings, I had to shake shell casings off my uniform before putting it on. A few had significant holes, so I had to replace them. Story 40. My sister set me up on a date with her friend, but I had to cancel because I was called into work. The friend ended up going out with someone else. After their date, she invited that person back to her place, but a jealous neighbor shot them both. Story 41. I had just driven to the grocery store and was on my way home. I stopped on a two-way, undecided road to make a left turn and was waiting for oncoming traffic to clear. I was alone and had music playing. I heard, clear as day, what sounded like a room full of people shouting my name. In my confusion, I looked up into the rearview mirror and saw a massive white SUV barreling toward me at high speed. I had a clear view of a blonde woman at the wheel, looking down at what I assumed was her phone. I slammed the accelerator and made my left turn, narrowly avoiding being rear-ended at what I estimated was 60 miles per hour. The SUV flew past where I had just been and didn't even slow down. I can't explain it. I can still remember the sound of those people shouting my name. Divine intervention? Who knows? Story 42. My friend and I were interested in the same girl. He managed to get a date with her and ended up being intimate with her. I felt a little upset until it became clear that he had chosen someone rather unpredictable. After that, I was just amused. Story 43. As a child, I loved kung fu movies. One day, when my parents were out, I decided to play with the largest knife we had. The cheap handle flew off, narrowly missing my brother's head. I never played with knives or scissors again. Story 44. There was a guy who was really into me in high school. He followed me around like a puppy and did my homework for me without my asking. However, I was dating someone else and we never got together. He went on to have children with someone else, and they were always fighting. Then one night, he shot her in the head, cut her into pieces, and took her dead body to work in their van. He even took the kids to daycare with her in the vehicle. Later that night, he tossed her head into the river, set their van on fire, and ran naked into town because he burned all his clothes when he started the fire. So, yes, it could have been me instead if we had ever gotten together, and I am sure of that. Story 45. When a company that rejected my resume files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, I envy companies that reject me and then subsequently experience strong growth. Story 46. It wasn't a bullet. It was a nuclear reactor meltdown. I met her at work and we started talking. I was wearing love goggles. She hid all her red flags. Red flags. She flirted with everyone, regardless of relationship status. She was a master manipulator and gaslighter. She knew just the right words to get her way, and her conventional attractiveness helped. She acted in morally questionable ways to get what she wanted, and if it didn't work, she would manipulate the situation. She eventually slept with my best friend while he was dating a coworker. She also shamed her past male partners about their sizes behind their backs. At that point, I wanted nothing to do with her. She would make up things to try to provoke me. It worked about 5% of the time. This bothered her greatly. Eventually, she convinced my whole friend group to stop inviting me because she didn't want to be uncomfortable. I went through a rough patch for a couple of months but kept my head high. Eventually, they had enough of her and no one liked her, so she quit. I don't blame my friend group. As I said, she was very manipulative. Things I heard from coworkers after she left included: 1. She liked me, though she chose someone else. She casually wondered how large my member was and stated it must be huge to my coworker, while she was dating the guy she chose over me. Toward the end, when she quit, I made it clear I was counting the days until she was gone. It sucks that I never truly get over someone I like, so part of me thinks about her every now and then. Story 47. I went on a dinner date with a girl near the beginning of the pandemic, so it was at my apartment. She showed up with a large bag, and I couldn't get her to leave for 3 weeks. I told her I didn't think it would work out when she finally went home. She texted, was blocked, texted from another number, was blocked, sent messages on Instagram, was blocked, created another Instagram account, was blocked, and then 3 months later sent another message on Instagram saying we were soulmates. She never told a joke, didn't understand my jokes, and exhibited sociopathic tendencies. About a week ago, I saw her picture at a local piercing shop I dislike because one person there is always rude to me. They got defensive when I mentioned I dated her and that she was crazy, so at least I understand why the customer service is poor, and she's still crazy. Story 48. I walked into a liquor store just after it was robbed. I bumped into the person as he was leaving. If I had not stopped to use the bathroom before I left, I would have walked right into the robbery. Story 49. I spent some extra time at the library. When we left, we saw an accident involving an oil truck and an SUV. It would have flipped our car if it had hit us. Story 50. I was in a physically abusive relationship with someone who experienced periods of psychosis. I took care of him during those times, but when he was more like himself, he would beat me. Eventually, during a psychotic episode, he believed people were spying on him through his phone. We went to get a new phone or upgrade his current phone at T-Mobile. He attempted to give his phone to a very small child in the store. When we got in the car, he told me that he had molested 2 kids when he was 18. I managed to sit through it and gather as much information as I could about the situation. I left him about a week later because I was in complete shock. I had to get a protective order against him for my safety, but the police did not take action regarding the report I filed about what he disclosed to me. This experience triggered a very destructive period in my life, during which I hurt myself for the next year. I am finally healing and coming back from all of that into someone I am very proud of. That experience was incredibly damaging, but I am now away from him, and I take pride in that. I was with him for 6 years on and off, having met him when I was 17 and he was about 20. Story 51. I was a foolish teenager working at a movie theater. The parking lot always flooded when it rained, and I thought it was really fun to play in. One day, there was a severe thunderstorm, so I ran out as soon as there was standing water. My friends were standing under the awning, yelling for me to come back, but I was too busy playing. I thought it was silly for them to be so scared. A few minutes passed, and my friends sounded increasingly panicked. I rolled my eyes and took pity on them. As soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I heard the loudest crack of thunder I had ever heard. The lightning struck simultaneously. My friends insisted the lightning hit the parking lot, but my back was turned. In my newfound wisdom, I decided not to play in puddles during thunderstorms anymore. Story 52. I had a crush on a girl who never liked me back. That's fine. I've dealt with rejection before, but she kept me around even after I asked her out. She never outright told me she didn't reciprocate my feelings. She allowed me to keep buying her gifts, to think of her, and to do things for her, always keeping me in an uncertain phase. She left the job we worked at to pursue another opportunity and told a mutual friend that she liked the attention and was disappointed to know that I was no longer pursuing her after I had moved on. Multiple friends who knew of the situation confirmed that it was for the best we never went out. Story 53. While in the military, I went on a date but did not sleep with a woman in my training squadron, who I later learned had transmitted a sexually transmitted infection to approximately 28 of my fellow airmen. I realize this number sounds high, but it's what I was told. I can confirm we held a special assembly on safe sex and preventing the transmission of sexually transmitted infections. Whatever the number was, I believe it was all due to her. Story 54. X has 2 children from 2 different people. I'm only 25. It would have been suffocating to settle down at this age. Story 55. I was engaged to someone who went out one night to socialize with other girls until 4 a.m., ignored my calls, and turned off his phone after a certain point, all while I had a panic attack at his mother's house because I had a strong feeling he was about to cheat on me. The next day was our menu tasting, the most traumatic experience of my life. Story 56. It felt like I was destined to have a child with my ex. She kept implying that she loved me deeply. I am glad I ended the relationship early on. I do have some regrets, but I believe I made the right decision by separating from her. I am not ready to have children yet, and I did not want to have a child with her either. I chose not to tell her. Story 57. My ex proposed to me and wanted to get me pregnant soon. He later confessed to being a serial child sexual predator and rapist, and he raped me too. I reported him to the FBI. He told me he would never tell another woman what he has done, and unfortunately, he didn't reveal all the victim names, but I hope they are found. He hasn't been arrested yet. There's a lot that happened, but this might just be the greatest dark gift I have received. Story 58. I moved 3 hours from home to manage a store for the company I worked for. I ended up disliking it there and moved back closer to home. A year or two later, that store location closed. Story 59. I got caught in an active shooter situation in Los Angeles 2 years ago with my brother. We literally dodged a bullet. Story 60. I was talking to this girl for only 2.5 weeks until she invited me to meet her mom and stepdad. She told me they wouldn't arrive beforehand, but they showed up 15 minutes later. As I spoke with her mom for the first time, I noticed the girl shaking her hips for her stepdad out of my peripheral vision. I ended things after about 3 months because she accused me of calling her names, even though I wasn't speaking. I later found out that she allowed her cat to engage in inappropriate behavior while she was alone. Story 61. I took one of the opening rounds fired in the Great Los Angeles Freeway shooting war back in the early 1980s. The bullet struck the car 18 inches behind my head. It was a large caliber rifle round that could have been fatal. Story 62. I was involved in a car accident on a highway when I was 16. I made a sudden U-turn without looking, and another vehicle collided with mine at 60 miles per hour. My car spun out and was totaled, while the other vehicle ended up in a ditch. If he had impacted just inches further up on my truck, I likely wouldn't be here to share this story. Story 63. In my senior year of high school, I had a crush on a 20-year-old. A few months after we became friends, she started dating a 15-year-old. Story 64. Very questionable workplace. I was supposed to be a manager and a door-to-door salesperson. After 2 interviews, I signed the contract and expressed my concerns about the sales aspect. I later discovered that my supervisor and the workplace were not trustworthy. The team shrank and those left were paid under the table. I saved myself a lot of stress. Story 65. The bullet hit, but it passed through, and I survived. I got married to my now ex-wife and was deployed to a combat zone where she cheated. When I returned, she stole my belongings, lied, and physically assaulted me because I wanted a divorce. I'm glad it happened. Otherwise, I might have still been with her. Story 66. I almost got married during COVID, but I purposely sabotaged the relationship. I later found out she was in a relationship with my half-brother, whom I had never met before. I avoided a bullet and a strange love triangle. Story 67. The condom broke once with an ex. She was barely 18 and I was 20. We were very scared. Luckily, there was no pregnancy. Today, she is on her 3rd marriage. We are in our 40s. Story 68. In high school, I went to the bathroom. I walked in and used the facilities. Another student came in and went into a stall. I always washed my hands, but for some reason that day I decided not to. I exited through the correct entrance. 20 seconds later, as I was walking down the hall, I heard massive screams of pain coming from that very bathroom. The resident troublemaker walked in from the left entrance as I walked out and stabbed the student in the stall. They found out that he had stolen a screwdriver from the woodshop and planned to start stabbing people. He was a bully who had gotten in trouble with the police multiple times and decided to seek revenge on everyone who reported him. When he heard someone in the bathroom, he chose to start there. Fortunately, the student who was stabbed survived, and a teacher who used to be a police officer was able to stop the attacker. If I had washed my hands that day, I would have definitely been stabbed. When I found out, I was terrified and shocked. It took a while for me to feel comfortable using public restrooms again. To this day, I still get chills whenever I have to. Story 69. I met someone whom I truly believed was the one for me. After 4 years, I could no longer deal with him. He was a leech, a parasite who used people and discarded them once they became useless to him. I witnessed good people come and go, and eventually, it was my turn to be let go. He has since moved on to his next victim, and I am grateful that he is no longer my problem. Story 70. Not marrying my ex who cheated on me 4 times, told me she would harm herself if I left, then tried to manipulate me into thinking about proposing when her best friend got engaged was the best decision I made. If I had married or had children with her, it would have been the biggest mistake of my life. Story 71. The former crush apparently lied about his age and was much younger than he suggested. He compared his ex-boyfriend to his most recent ex, which is why they are no longer together. He also told him, "You cannot have any relationships or contact with any of your exes," while he himself was maintaining contact. Story 72. I ran into a girl I had a huge crush on in high school. She is still pretty. We talked for a bit and she said we should hang out. When I asked what they were into that evening, she mentioned that she and her friends were going to a party and casually said her fiancé would be there. Once I heard that, I said I had a test on Tuesday and needed to study, but we should all meet up at some point to catch up. I watched my movie while they watched theirs, and then I went home. The next day, I went to class, and when I got back, there was a message on my answering machine from a buddy from high school asking me to call him. He asked if I remembered her, and I said yes, I ran into her last night. He then told me she was dead. I was shocked because she looked pretty lively when I saw her about 12 hours ago. Apparently, they went to the party, got drunk and high, and decided to go to either Waffle House or Denny's, where they were killed in a car accident. I just remember thinking, holy cow, if she had been single, I would be dead. Story 73. I was ghosted by a man who, 3 years later, was arrested for domestic assault by strangulation, followed by another domestic assault, and eventually for violating a protective order and stalking. This all took place over a span of 12 months. That poor girl. Story 74. At 13, I realized that the middle-aged church deacon who doted on me, anointing me with frankincense and myrrh as a prophet of the new generation, was sexually attracted to me. He swore me to keep it a secret from my non-Christian parents. I left quickly before anything worse could happen and later understood that I had spent 3 years of my childhood in a cult. Story 75. When we were kids, we played around abandoned mine tailings. Some mistaken hunters thought we were animals and they fired at us. I saw a chip of concrete fly by about a foot from my face. Story 76. I had a relationship with someone who tried to pressure me into having a child when I was 19. She insisted on not using a condom, but I used one and withdrew at the end. Years later, she admitted this because she wanted to rely on someone. Fortunately, she found a person she loves and who loves her back. And now she has children. I'm happy for her. Story 77. A guy I had been seeing ghosted me. I found out a few weeks later that he was married. He told me he was getting a divorce. Story 78. I just don't think I could be with anyone who doesn't love Jesus. She said this straight-faced and serious on our last date. Story 79. European here. I had an American girlfriend. She was religious, and I'm pretty sure she's a Republican. She ended our relationship a long time ago. Story 80. During my student teaching, I had to move schools because the original teacher I was matched with had to go on emergency medical leave. I almost ended up at a school I had attended before, but it was far away. Luckily, there was an opening at a school much closer, and I ended up there. A few weeks later, a first grader shot his teacher at the school I could have ended up at. I literally dodged that bullet. Story 81. I was pursued by several police officers after I burned down 3 orphanages, but fortunately, I managed to evade their gunfire. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.